Inflation is at high levels in most advanced economies around the world today. The vast majority of Western countries recorded some of the highest inflation rates of the century by the end of 2022. For example, in December 2021, the annual inflation in places like Spain or the United States surpassed 7.5%. If you have been following inflation numbers, you have probably seen similar figures. However, what if I told you that there is a place where inflation has been virtually unknown for over 10 years? Well, according to the chart, Switzerland seems to live in a completely different scenario when it comes to inflation. Price increases in Switzerland are up to 5 times smaller than in its Western neighbors. It's as if the Swiss live on another planet. Although some may argue that the chart shows an inflation rate of 1.6% for Switzerland in 2021, and while that rate is considered low, we can say that it practically doesn't exist compared to other countries. In reality, this 1.6% inflation rate is an exception for the Swiss country. Since 2009, Switzerland has had negative inflation in 70% of the years. Furthermore, when positive inflation levels were recorded, they never exceeded 1%. Translating this into technical language, we can say that Switzerland is a country accustomed to deflation, meaning that prices decrease in all sectors year after year. The question is, how does this happen? What is Switzerland's secret? Does its central bank not print money like the rest of the world? Well, get ready, because here comes the most interesting part. The Swiss National Bank not only prints money all the time but does so at an impressive rate. To give you an idea, in the last 10 years, the volume of Swiss francs in circulation has increased fourfold. This represents a significant increase in the money supply, being nearly 60% larger than the European Central Bank during the same period of time. Therefore, when people claim that printing money inevitably causes inflation, the Swiss example shows that it is not always the case. Anyway, considering all this, some questions arise. How does Switzerland manage to avoid inflation? What does this country have that others don't? Besides low taxes and the world's finest watches, in this video, we will answer all these questions. Stay tuned. Have you ever wondered how exactly a central bank works? If you still don't know, the central bank of a country is the institution responsible for printing money, regulating interest rates, and controlling inflation. But what is the step-by-step mechanism that allows them to carry out all this work? How does the central bank inject money into the economy to control inflation? Well, the answer involves understanding a slightly different concept. Central banks function almost like businesses. They own assets, savings, and debts. Moreover, they can even make profits. To give you an idea, in 2022, the Central Bank of Brazil had a loss of $298.5 billion, while in the year 2021, it recorded a record profit of $85.9 billion. In the case of the Swiss National Bank, it goes beyond that. Not only does the Swiss Central Bank make profits like any other company, but it is also listed on the stock exchange. Yes, you can actually buy a share and receive a portion of these profits every year. But stay tuned, this is not an investment recommendation. But where exactly does this profit come from? What exactly is the business of a central bank that allows it to make money? Well, the truth is that its name makes it quite clear, central bank. First of all, it is a bank and earns money through loans and investments. The question is, who does it lend this money to, and more importantly, what is the source of the money it lends? On one hand, central banks can lend money to governments, and on the other hand, they can lend to commercial banks. Another source is loans, which, like any other bank, are granted with interest. That's where the profits come from. An interesting fact about this whole matter is that the money borrowed by the central bank is newly created money, freshly printed money, to put it better. So, adding 2 plus 2 together, the money you have in your wallet came from a loan that the central bank made to a bank or the government, and sooner or later, it will have to be repaid, for example, through taxes. But you must be wondering what all of this I just told you has to do with the fact that there is no inflation in Switzerland. Well, hold on tight, because now comes the best part. Imagine that in a table, we write down all the accounting movements of the Swiss National Bank. In a section called Liabilities, we note the total money created in the economy, which is $8.3 trillion. And in the other section, called Assets, we note who all that money was lent to. Specifically, the Swiss government receives these loans, while commercial banks receive another portion. However, you have probably already noticed something. If we add up the money from loans granted to banks and governments, there is still $1.4 trillion missing compared to the total amount of money issued. So, the question is, where is all that money? You see, what actually happens is that central banks have a third way to introduce the money they have printed into the economy, a way that you probably don't know about. This third way consists of buying assets, such as stocks or even foreign currencies. These assets are held as a kind of reserve, known as central bank reserves. And believe me when I say they are essential for controlling inflation or exchange rates. If a central bank has very high reserves, such as gold reserves, for example, when an unexpected period of inflation or a drop in exchange rates occurs, it can sell the gold reserves in exchange for recovering part of its own currency. By doing so, by repurchasing its currency with gold or other assets, the central bank can reduce the amount of money in circulation and halt the devaluation of its currency. In other words, having ample reserves is an important guarantee that the central bank will be able to control the supply and demand of its currency, ensuring that its currency has a stable and secure value. But if you want a more concrete explanation, let's look at some numbers. In the case of the Central Bank of Brazil, as we have seen, these reserves amount to about $300 billion. That means the central bank has a significant backing for its currency. The question is, can you guess how much reserve the Swiss National Bank holds? Well, hold on to your seat because it is no less than what you just saw on the screen. More than 9 out of 10 reserves are backed by gold, portions of companies like Amazon, Google, and Apple, or assets from foreign countries. And if the reserves of the Swiss National Bank were divided among Swiss citizens, each of them would receive over $114,000. Now, compare this policy with that of central banks that dedicate themselves to giving money to the government so that they can spend it as they please. By the way, that is what the central bank has been doing for quite some time. But let's not get into that subject right now. We could say that the Swiss National Bank is something like a massive investment fund. And pay close attention, we are not only talking about the fact that its reserves are extremely high, but also that these reserves continue to grow year after year, thanks to the returns obtained from its investments. Thanks to the Swiss National Bank's enormous investments, Swiss political institutions and the economy possess two unique superpowers in the world. The first is that, as a result of the central bank's profits, the Swiss state, being the largest shareholder, receives extraordinary, practically free financing every year. The second superpower is simply the profit. If you think about it, a currency with such backing, security, and stability is a perfect investment for all those savers who want to protect their money. In other words, during periods of economic crisis or inflation, the Swiss franc functions practically like gold, that is, as a perfect protection for the economies of a large part of the world. This also explains news like this. As you can imagine, the fact that the Swiss franc has become an investment product has driven its value to astronomical levels. To give you an idea of the strength of the Swiss franc, in the year 2000, it was possible to buy only $60 with 100 Swiss francs. Today, with the same amount of francs, it is possible to buy over $100. The value has nearly doubled in just 20 years. That being said, now think for a moment. The more investors want to buy francs, the higher its price will rise. And the higher its price rises, the easier it will be for the central bank to buy new reserves and ensure even more security, attracting more and more investors. As a result, the central bank can print more and more francs to exchange them for foreign currencies, which are largely converted into stocks. And all this without generating inflation. Yes, indeed, the Swiss franc is a continuously growing currency. Although the strength of the central bank is more than enough to explain the absence of inflation in Switzerland, there is still a second fundamental aspect that we have not yet addressed. Can you guess what it is? I'm sure many of you have heard that Switzerland is a tax haven. Switzerland used to be a country where banking secrecy was absolute. This secrecy was one of the pillars of its activity and also one of its greatest assets. For decades, it allowed investors to hide vast fortunes from the tax authorities. However, after various political scandals, OECD countries managed to corner Switzerland for facilitating money laundering with its banking secrecy. Apparently, at least in terms of banking secrecy, Switzerland is no longer a tax haven. In terms of taxes, very little tax is actually paid in Switzerland. Additionally, the fact that there are no taxes on capital gains also attracts investors. In summary, Switzerland's low taxes have an impact on inflation. With these low taxes, companies from around the world see Switzerland as an excellent place to invest. Not only because they will pay less in taxes, but also because these low taxes attract highly skilled foreign workers to the country, whom the companies can easily hire. In conclusion, Switzerland's unique approach, supported by its robust central bank and favorable fiscal policies, has allowed the country to maintain stability, security, and low inflation rates. The Swiss model serves as an intriguing example for other nations seeking to achieve economic stability and attract international investments. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found this exploration of Switzerland's unconventional method to eliminate inflation informative and thought-provoking. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us continue producing more content like this. Until next time.